after all these years, our mission remains as ever to bring you the nation's most celebrated poets and writers, along with the Northeast's finest musicians, in programs that lift your spirits while they deepen your minds. And if we have a little fun along the way, I promise you a complete recovery. From our public interest desk, I want to call your attention to an item we recently received in the mail. As you can see, it's a little booklet with a pretty woman on the cover. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Its title is Poetry. It's true. Its contents feature more pretty women. Quite slender, wearing nice clothes appropriate for fall or winter wear. A closer inspection reveals that the clothes are all made of natural fibers: silk, organic cotton, various wools. Here, for example, is an alpaca boucher sweater. Nice stuff. All priced for the middle-class consumer. A London-based company. But what are we to make of this brand? Poetry. Of course, poetry is also the name of the great and enduring literary journal, founded in 1912 by the legendary American poet Marianne Moore. Poetry, the fashion catalog, is the same size and shape as Poetry, the literary journal. They're brands with the straightforward, identical capital letters spelling poetry. All but identical. What are we to make of this? What are they selling? Should we be encouraged or dismayed by this? Well, whilst you ponder this, I would invite you to remove your cell phones from your purse or pocket. Holding them up like this, roundly curse them for the tyranny they exercise over your lives. Then please switch them off, and we'll get on with our show. The Arts Café, of course, is known for the poetry and music we present, but every once in a while we like to change things up a bit. So for our opening voice tonight, we're pleased to present you a short play by Melanie Greenhouse. Ms. Greenhouse is a poet and writer, as well as a playwright, and as many of you know, she collaborated with yours truly to conceive and found this series and directed it for its first decade. Her full-length plays, including This Point of Land and Chestina Vanessa Polson, have been produced in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Virginia. Tonight's one-act play is called Bald Eagle and will be presented as Reader's Theater. Imagine, if you will, that it's February. Carl and Luann are young newlyweds on an eagle tour set on the Connecticut River. They're swaddled in winter clothes. They're in love with each other and with life. The eagle they encounter is bald, bitter, sardonic, a salacious creature, albeit with a noble-looking exterior. Imagine that he is sitting on a dilapidated sofa. A beat-up refrigerator is nearby. He regards the tour boat approaching with the fierce look of a bird of prey. We give you Bald Eagle.
Well, this is
something new and interesting to try. How'd you hear about it?
Radio. NPR.
Bit pricey, though.
Not too. You're worth every penny.
And so, are you?
We're worth it. Bitter cold out here on the river, though.
Oh, dear. Oh, I have some cocoa.
Oh, Carl, you think of everything. Delish, that hits the spot. I love you.
I love you, too.
I think I'm going to throw up.
Any luck yet?
Not yet. You?
Well, honey, I'd tell you if I saw something.
Promise?
Luann, what sort of question is that? You know I'd tell you if I come. What?
I think I spotted one.
Where?
Over there.
Where over there?
Yes, I see one.
Honey, try to be precise. Describe the landmark.
Wow, this is just so amazing. My first bald eagle. Gorgeous, noble creature.
Where are you looking exactly?
You see that tree limb overhanging just beyond the rocky outcropping over the river?
I'm looking. I don't see it.
Here, use my binoculars.
Oh, why, yes! I see him now. Wow! What a cool dude!
Dude? For Pete's sake, Carl! What makes you so sure he's a dude?
His posture. He looks like he's got things under control.
I'm unemployed, you fool.
Well, little does Mr. Dude know, but he's been brought back from the brink of extinction. Just imagine, one pocket of habitat we've managed to preserve. One green zone left, spared the bulldozer, where our nation's symbol can regenerate and thrive.
I don't have health insurance.
Oh, honey, the boat's getting closer. He's huge. Are my binoculars working? Can you see him?
Clear as a bell, I can see every tail feather. Impressive.
Another boatload of gawkers. Can't a bird have any privacy?
Oh, wait, look. I think he's taking off.
Oh, check out that wingspan. Whoa.
I think he's about to dive for a fish. And he dives.
Oh, not so loud. We don't want him to be aware of us.
About time for another beer run.
Ooh, he's caught something.
He dropped it.
Oh, wait, he's going after it again?
And away, dude, don't give up. Back to his branch. Chow time.
Look at that bird. Put it away. Oh.
Thirsty soul.
I'm drinking, you morons. The only pleasure left.
Beer.
You know, I don't understand why they're called bald. Doesn't sound very respectful of our nation's symbol. And he's not really bald.
Why, thank you, madam.
Would you prefer follically challenged eagle?
Hey, a card. You're such a card.
Oh, Carl, I think I might vomit.
Oh, look, Carl. He's lifting one of his talons.
Interesting. Just holding it out there.
Maybe he's saluting us.
I love the way you anthropomorphize everything.
You aren't being sarcastic, are you?
Oh, honey. I actually love the way you give human attributes to animals and inanimate objects. It's one of the many things I love about you.
Oh, he seems to be grooming himself now.
You mean preening. I think the word is preening.
Preening. You're right. I admire word choice. But you said it with just a hint of arrogance.
Honey, I don't have an arrogant bone in my body.
Oh, never mind. Maybe it's just me.
If this boatload of nincompoops and losers can't find something better to do with their time, I'll show them the other side of the nation's symbol.
Oh, look, he's taking to flight again.
Oh, Carl! He's right overhead. So close you can almost touch him.
Look at that belly, would you? He's put away some fish in his day. Luann, watch out!
Well, that should keep them happy for a while.
Oh, Carl, you're covered. Let me help. Oh, it's all inside the hood of your coat. Here, I have some tissues.
My new coat! Here I was trying to spare you from getting hit. I got splattered. My new coat's brand new!
It's okay. I'll clean it some more when we get home.
I smell like eagle poop. My coat will smell like eagle poop. You'll never be able to get this odor out. It's too pungent.
Oh, honey, I have cleaning products. I know what I'm doing. Cheer up. I love you.
It's okay. You don't need to wipe it off anymore. I just won't use the hood.
I said, I love you.
Yeah. So?
So you're supposed to say, I love you back.
You know I love you. It's a little preoccupied with my new coat at the moment.
But your coat is just a material object. It can be replaced.
Yeah, but I love this coat.
You love your coat?
A toast to you bubble-headed newlyweds. You have no idea what you're in for.
Oh, look, honey. He's going back to his perch to finish his fish.
I'm getting cold.
Have some cocoa.
Not in the mood for cocoa. I just want to go home now.
But we've only seen one eagle.
You've seen one, you've seen them all.
Oh, now, Carl, that wasn't a very nice thing to say.
We've been out for less than an hour. I can't ask the captain to return for just one passenger. We paid $80 for these tickets.
Actually, why don't you all go back to your dens or lairs or whatever you humans propagate in? Give me some peace and quiet. So much for an undisturbed habitat.
All right, then, I'll ask the captain myself.
You're letting this whole poop incident spoil our afternoon.
Oh, you don't have to end your tour. I'll just wait for you in the ticket office where it's warm.
But I wanted to share this with you. It's no fun alone.
Luann, lose that sucker. He's no good for you. I'm your man. Come to me, baby. I'll give you everything you ever dreamed of. A warm nest. Beer. Sex. Like you've never imagined. And hey, I'm the nation's symbol to boot. Doesn't get much better than this.
Please tell the captain I'd like to go back to shore right now.
But Carl...
Yes, Luann, let him go. It could be you and me. Warm nest, beer. Do you have health benefits?
You go tell the captain. I think you're being a little unreasonable.
Unreasonable. He's an asshole, Luann. Toss him overboard.
All right. I'll go ask the captain myself.
Suit yourself.
Over here, Luann. Look at me. Noble, handsome as all get out. Available.
The captain has radioed for a launch to come for me. Your tour won't be interrupted.
Fun.
Okay.
Fun.
Announce that we have Melanie Greenhouse's book of one-act plays for sale tonight, which is called Read My Shorts. As always, all proceeds go to the author, and this gives me a chance to thank our friends at Bank Square Books for their support. It's Mystic lucky to have so hip and friendly an independent bookstore. Also want to thank the Mystic Arts Center for welcoming the Arts Cafe again. Our community is fortunate to have such a resource, and we are grateful to be at home here. So, on with our show. My friends, if you are open to music that sways and swings and sometimes even slouches toward the sultry, the sexy, and the sophisticated, if you believe that you are man or woman enough for a bit of musical wit with a wiggle and a wink, then you're in for a treat. Because tonight's musical interlude is served up by Fred and Friends Jazz Quartet. Fred Mileski has been celebrated as both cabaret and classical singer, with a repertoire that spans jazz, musical theater, opera, oratorio, and sacred music. She's performed throughout the US and in Canada and in Europe. But it's the great American songbook that engages her tonight. Songs you may know well, and songs that will surprise, tickle, and treat you for their novelty. Ms. Mileski is back tonight by a trio of some of the finest musicians in New England. Some of you remember them in various ensembles that have brought down the house at past Arts Cafes. They include Rufus Davis on piano, Jim Hunter on bass, and John Moore on drums. So without more ado, won't you please welcome Fred and Friends.
I'm late for a very important date. No time to say hello, goodbye. I'm late. When I wave, I lose some time I save. My fuzzy ears and whiskers took me much too long to shave. I run and I hide, then I survive. There's danger if I get to stop, and here's the reason why you see I'm overdue. I'm in a rabbit stew. yours, but definitely story of my life. So, here's a tune called Watermelon Man. But then Gloria Lynn came along, and so did Manfred Mann, and they both actually wrote separate sets of lyrics. And I'm like, hey, Watermelon Man has lyrics, that's awesome. I'm singing it. All right, well, what are we doing? Okay, oh, all right. Oh, yeah. Oh, here's another song based on my life. I'll just leave it at that. nothing. My heart all full of pain. And perhaps I deserve you and be even worthy of you if I only had a brain.
By Bono, yeah, that U2 guy. In and out gospel style. Whatever that means to you, just take it and run with it. It's not all about me. Don't you love these guys? Are they great?
Through
Blow me a chord there, good sir.
Which chord?
Oh, whatever it says. Any chord you want.
Any chord?
I'll guess.
To go so awfully fast. We had so much fun and now you're home at last. I looked forward to a kiss or two at the garden gate, but you gave me just one peck and insisted it was late. Give me 5 minutes more. Give me 5 minutes more. Let me stay in your arms. Here am I, begging for only 5 minutes more. Only 5 minutes more of your charm. Oh, we know that dreams about a Saturday date. Don't show that Sunday morning you can sleep late. Give me 5 minutes more. Give me 5 minutes more. Let me stay in your arms. Oh, ignore the dreams about a Saturday date. Don't show the Sunday morning you can sleep late. Give me 5 minutes more, only 5 minutes more. Let me stay, let me stay. Let me stay in your
Thank you very much.
I don't exaggerate, my friends, in saying that Eileen Myles is like no other poet. In part, this must be because Myles isn't a product of academia, didn't attend an MFA program, didn't seek the usual university sinecures, and has, with fierce independence, created what the New York Times called one of the essential voices in American poetry. Indeed, Myles may be the ultimate poetry outsider. And yet the poems are exemplary for their warmth, their heart, their humanity. Eileen Myles's life and career make for a riveting tale in themselves. They and they is their personal pronoun of choice. They were born in Cambridge, Mass, to working class Irish Catholic parents. Early on, they discovered that they were queer and that their queerness was a matter to celebrate. Coming of age in the early 70s, well before the advent of the LGBT movement, this was in itself an act of courage. Following graduation from UMass Boston, Myles made 2 more fateful decisions: to move to New York City and to become a poet. Imagine. They arrived at the Big Apple in '74, just as the East Village was emerging as both cradle and crucible for music, art, poetry. There, the young Myles invented the voice that became one of the great instruments in American poetry, a voice defined by candor, directness, and humor. Once personal, and natural in its edgy urban sensibility. A voice adaptable to a seemingly endless spectrum of emotional and intellectual inquiry. The Boston Globe has described Eileen Myles as, in quotes, that rare creature, a rock star of poetry. The New Yorker, in turn, has characterized Myles as a, quote, kick-ass countercultural icon. Well, I have no idea what is meant by either of those comments. But the fact is that in 4 decades, Eileen Myles has put in the hard labor of creating a remarkable body of work that spans more than 20 books. The output includes 2 wildly original novels and a wonderful book of short stories called Chelsea Girls. It includes a unique book of travel essays called The Importance of Being Iceland, and a popular memoir of their beloved dog called Afterglow. Several of Myles's plays and opera libretti have been produced in New York. And along the way, they wrote a ton of reviews and essays about art and theater that appeared in Art Forum, The New Yorker, Harper's, The Nation, Paris Review, to name but a few. Myles also, in her free time, became a solo performance artist who toured the nation and the world. Poems written by and a character based on Myles appeared in seasons 2 and 3 of the Emmy-winning Amazon TV show Transparent. And in 1991-92, they even ran for President of the United States of America. Campaigning in 28 states and via MTV as an openly female candidate. Unfortunately, she didn't win. But looming over all is the poetry, filling more than a dozen volumes and culminating in I Must Be Living Twice, her new and selected poems, which is a magnum opus surveying 40 astonishing years of poems. Though well outside the mainstream, Myles's work has earned many honors, including the Lambda Award, 4-time winner, the Clark Prize, and the Shelley Award from the Poetry Society of America. Tonight we catch Myles with a brand new book of poems called Evolution. My friends, it is with great pride that the Arts Café Mystic presents you Eileen Myles.
But so thank you for inviting me, and nice meeting you guys. And I had a lovely dinner, and grew up in New England, so I'm really happy to be here. And I drove from New York, and I love driving. The traffic was horrible. And so I'm just going to read. And I was urged to, because you probably don't know my work, so to kind of go backwards and read some earlier stuff and kind of take a little road tour through it all. So I'm going to do that. And you guys are great. Music was amazing. Play was great. So. We all do the same stuff except different. It's kind of interesting, you know? Okay, this first poem is called Honey Bear, or The Honey Bear. I don't have a Boston accent anymore, except when I read poetry. So I'm translating. Honey Bear. Billie Holiday was on the radio. I was standing in the kitchen smoking my cigarette. This pack I planned to finish tonight, last night, of smoking youth. I made a cup of this funny kind of tea I've had hanging around, a little too sweet, an odd mix. My only impulse was to make it sweeter. Ivy Anderson was singing pretty late tonight in my very bright kitchen. I'm standing by the tub, feeling a little older, nearly 30 in my very bright kitchen tonight. I'm not a bad-looking woman, I suppose. Oh, it's very quiet in my kitchen tonight. I'm squeezing this plastic honey bear, a noodle of honey dripping into the odd sweet tea. It's pretty late. Honey bear's cover was loose, and somehow honey dripping down the bear's face, catching in the crevices beneath the bear's eyes. Oh, very sad and sweet. I'm standing in my kitchen. Oh, honey. I'm staring at the honey bear's face. You guys are great. Okay, this is gonna be all right. This one's called Along the Strand. And I was in my 20s, and you would, there was like 2 all-night restaurants in the East Village in the 70s, and I was often, because I lived the way I lived, often sitting in them. When I was a coke dealer, it was not literal, I wasn't a coke dealer, but along the Strand. When I was a coke dealer, I just snorted all the profits. Or like the time I fell in love with morning, it was something I could stay with. I would stick around, but it slipped into noon, and again I fell in love. At twilight, I was meditative and prayerful, and by night, I was truly in love with someone I could not see. The person who invented inventions was the same one who waited to see what everyone was requesting, and then she invented inventing. I tasted that once, but now it is no longer new. The countermen placing chairs atop tables, the tables are clean, and the radio plays all the new songs. What night was it that you told me that how the last time you felt this way, you just walked and walked? Well, I am the ghost of the coffee shops who started smoking very late. My father told me they cause cancer, and I still believe they cause cancer. There is something wonderful about plastic tables that resemble wood, and I am dreaming of a tree by a stream that resembles plastic. For I am inventing again. And I am walking backwards. I grow deeply religious as a child, and as a well-adjusted nun, I am grateful to the child who grew me. I am grateful to Dad's tip-off concerning cigarettes, and believing in denouement, your footsteps have stopped. You are gladly resting on your couch. Vouching for the honesty of mourning, he left me, became someone else who I found beneath the plastic tree at noon. Vigorous twilight is our resting place, and we will exchange glowing photos in the night. Invention produces pools, and they are not in demand. Invention produces pools, and they are not in demand. I am endlessly walking, and a solid-colored day is more to my liking. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. The singing voice produces color, shades her day. She is a nun of my love who draws bands of smoke, which is prayer. I snorted all the prophets. I sleep on a pillow, which is my nose. I find it very religious. My mother taught me sex was dirty, which was exciting. She taught me love is romantic. I didn't start until quite late. Exciting, romantic, I'm quite sure it is the one thing I have invented. The times of the day, the ones with names, they are like the stripes of sex, unlike romance, who dream-like is a continuous walker. Obviously, a solid-colored day is unexciting. I bring my best romance to morning. I bring my best romance to noon. Night, the old charmer, is in love with candles, holds a fistful of morning behind her back. So you are no longer walking, and this is no particular cigarette. A beautiful nun may be dreaming my life, or I am inventing again. In ancient Greece, a mystical child examines 3 ribbons. The oldest woman in this part of town is aware of her hair, black, white, and gray. Even as she lay dying, even as she first and her lover's words caressed her like smoke, inventing pools in her gorgeous and tangled black hair. In 1979, we're like back there, a gang of us, all female, decided to make a play in at St. Mark's Church. And it was really crazy. It was very typical of the time. We spent 6 months working on this play for like a one-night performance, no rehearsal. And it was called Joan of Arc, a Spiritual Entertainment. And as a Catholic or ex-Catholic or whatever, I was very Joan of Arc was my first real hero. So I did research for the play, and this poem was part of the play, but it's sort of like my souvenir too. It's called Joan. Today, May 30th, Joan of Arc was burned. She was 19, and when she died, a man saw white doves fly from her mouth. Joan was born in 1412 between Lorraine and Champagne. Joan was raised on legends. Merlin said France would be lost by a woman and saved by a virgin. Joan was not an adventurous girl, not a tomboy, but very dreamy, good, stay at home, the baby of the family. Joan never got her period. She heard these voices in the bells. She saw angels in colored glass. She believed the sun moved around the earth because that's what she saw. She believed God wanted Charles VII to be King of France because that's what Michael, Catherine, and Margaret told her when she listened to the bells. Her father said he'd drown her if she didn't stop this nonsense. She was 19 years old when they burned her body in the middle of town while she was still alive. A white dove came out of her mouth as she died. 548 years ago today, a dove leaped right out of her mouth. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, I think we're in the, we're at 84 now. It's called Holes. Once when I passed East 4th Street off First Avenue, I think it was in early fall, and I had a small hole on the shoulder of my white shirt and another on my back. I looked just beautiful. There was a whole moment in the 70s when it was beautiful to have holes in your shirts and sweaters. By now it was 1981, but I carried that 70s style around like a torch. There's a whole way of feeling about yourself that was more European than American. Unless it was American around 1910, when it was beautiful to be a strong, starving immigrant who believed so much in herself, and she was part of a movement as big as history, and it explained the hole in her shirt. It's the beginning of summer tonight, and every season has cracks through which winter or fall might leak out. The most perfect flavor of it early in June. I remember when I was an immigrant, I took a Black Beauty. A Black Beauty is a drug. It's like there's a whole generation of kids who have never heard of this before, and they think it's a horse. So I always feel like I took a Black Beauty and got up from the pile of poems around my knees and just had too much energy for thought and walked over to your house where there was continuous beer. Finally, we were just drinking Rheingold, a hell of a beer. At the door, I mentioned I had a crush on both of you, what you say to a couple. By now, the kids were in bed. I can't even say clearly now that I wanted the woman, though it seemed to be the driving principle then, wanting one of everything. I was part of a generation of people who went to the bars on 7th Street and drank the cheap whiskey and the ale on tap and dreamed about when I would get you alone, those big breasts. I carried slim notebooks which only permitted 2 or 3 word lines. I need you, nearing the horse. There was blood in all my titles and milk. I had 2 bright blue pills in my pocket. I loved you so much. It was the last young thing I ever did, the end of my renaissance, an immigration into my dream world, which even my grandparents had not dared to live, being prisoners of schizophrenia and alcohol, though I was lovers with the 2. The beauty of the story is that it happened. It was the last thing that happened in New York. Everything else happened while I was stopping it from happening. Everything else had a life of its own. I don't think I owe them an apology, though at least one of their kids hates my guts. She can eat my guts for all I care. I had a small hole in the front of my black sleeveless sweater. It was just something that happened. It got larger and larger. I liked to put my finger in it. In the month of December, I couldn't get out of bed. I kept waking up at 6 p.m. and it was Christmas or New Year's and I had to start drinking and eating. I remember you handing me the most beautiful red plate of pasta. It was like your on a plate. I met people in your house, even found people to go out and regrettably not knowing about the forbidden fruit. I forget what the only sin is. Somebody told me recently. I have so many holes in my memory between me and the things I'm separated from. I pick up a book and another book, and memory and separation seem to be all anyone writes about, or all they seem to let me read. But I remember those beautiful holes on my back like a beautiful cloak of feeling. I think we're in the 90s now. This poem is called No, No. And it's sort of like yes without all the baggage, kind of, you know. So. Look, I don't know about getting things back. A woman stands in a room and it's winter. She sees herself. There are 3 hot things to tell her lover. Soon the day changes shape. Not this bird, but it's different. The box stays, the room in her head. Soon both heat and winter are gone. I want to live in my thoughts of you. I believe in you like a door that returns. In this one, there was a big show of Jackson Pollock's late paintings at the Met, I think. And it was really interesting. I mean, it was a beautiful show. And what was really interesting was on the catalog things, on the little wall markers, they actually talked about his alcoholism, like it was part of the story, which it was. But you never saw that in an art museum before. And there was a piece called Blue Poles. And apparently he was so messed up at that point in his life that his friends had to hold him up so that he could do his work. He couldn't stand up and do it. So that was in my head, as well as the girlfriend I had at the time was always shopping. And so I was sitting on the stoops of stores writing poems while I was waiting for her to buy something. So my wife is shopping. You couldn't mistake that for happiness. His friends helped him down, and they began, hands on the floor, same age as my father. One was out in the hall crying. Sand, broken glass, but it's a kind of happiness. 4 sad gestures. She was in both accidents. It looked like a shop, and I was ashamed, disappointed. She said, "Follow me." And everything collapsed. I hadn't changed. I knew everyone. I was saved from living by these boxes I keep things in, cities, lives, histories. This is my most jazz poem, so I'll dedicate this to the musicians wherever they are. Well, I mean, I have to say, when I first got to New York in the 70s, I worked at a place called the West End Bar that was on the Upper West Side, and they had a jazz room in the back, and it was so crazy. It was my first job in New York. I was the bouncer, and what that was they figured a woman wouldn't get beat up. But actually, all the waitresses were these really tough girls from New York who were always protecting me from getting beaten up. You know, because it was always some guy, like, because I was seating people, and I was like, "You can't come in." And they were like, "What?" You know, and these girls would run in and protect me. But the thing that I learned about watching people play jazz was that musicians are all making these weird faces. They're all like, you know, and then the piano player is like, you know. And it took me years as a poet to realize I could make faces too, which I may or may not be doing as I'm reading, but I just feel it. So this is called writing. I can connect any 2 things. That's God. Teeny piece of Band-Aid, little folded piece of Band-Aid. I ran to the bathroom to see my face. Sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror. Sometimes I can't bear my thoughts. Sometimes I can't do anything, but that's okay. Band-Aid, book, God. That's right. You know, jazz players do that. They hit the cymbal and they go, "That's right, that's right." You know, it's like, what do you mean? I was like, I can do that. Okay, this is just me walking my dog. It's called The Center. This is a place where we can just sit, flesh of a Caucasian-colored building. Now, don't change your mind. It's Allen Street. The sky is my favorite color. Well, one of them. It's just something in terms of color. Blue, certainly. It's a very wide cut above dark, but this blue has such certainty. Never more blue than this, and one that is soft. That's right, now lie down while I see it through. The trees, the tickling hands of my friends, my favorite in the world. I love the it favorite. When it comes to favoring, liking, and loving, and choosing all your life, and one sky meets all the trees you've ever known in a long squirt of light, and it's still not night. The light's a neon, and we get to rest. That's it, my animal. This broad stoop is a raft, and I will continue to be young until I'm famous. And snug in this exactitude, the act of waning choosing, I'll write while it's light. Okay, this is, I'm gonna move to the newer stuff, and this is the best poem I ever wrote. So it's all up and downhill after this. It's called The Baby. The baby says to the old man, let's have a cup of coffee. The old man says, now you're talking. What? Come on, that's like, holy shit. All right? Do it again, okay. The baby says to the old man, let's have a cup of coffee. The old man says, now you're talking. I sent this to the New Yorker. Do they take it? No. I was like, what are you, crazy? This is like, what are you doing with this magazine? No. See, it's never going to be as good as that. I was just like, okay, this next one is called Paint Me a... and there was a story, it was many stories to this, but one of them is that in Provincetown, where I've lived some of the time, we knew there was a painter there who had a gallery, and she's a really good painter, but all she ever did was like get your idea and take that and paint like that. Like she was able to copy anybody's work. She was amazing. We were like, she could paint anything. So I was like, well, paint me a... like, but that's not the poem. Okay. The title is Paint Me a... and also, I'm going to keep telling you stories. My mother, who died about a year ago, was watching TV with my sister, and it was on one of those talk shows, like who was it? Like one of the very confessional, embarrassing talk shows. And they had all these trans people on, and they were talking about how they had experienced themselves as being male in a female body, and female in a male body. And my mother was sitting there with my sister. She goes, "I think Eileen's like that." My sister's like, "What?" And my mother goes, "Yes, like when she was a child, she would never stop saying she wanted a..." And it was just like, I have no memory of this. This is so weird. So I just wanted to share this with you guys. I was like, really? I have no memory. And plus, the weird part is my mother never told me this. My mother just happened to be watching TV with my sister when she was in her 80s, and she happened to tell my sister. You know, would always like say to my mother, "Tell us something about our childhood." She said, "I don't remember." She just needed to watch the right talk show. He's like, "Oh my God." I was like, Eileen's like that. Okay. If the best thing the world discovered today is that at the inside of the universe is a cat, I love your braids. I love your peaceful eating. I hate that the sum total effect of the schedule was sadness. Did you read the schedule? Nope. I'm jealous. If he used the same words over and over again in plays and movies and commencement addresses, is that wrong? Is art wrong? What if art is wrong? Is there only one sun? Some planets have two. When the rain was pouring, I wanted to be in here, silent with you, in the dog's beady black gaze, in the room with the sleeping dog, with you leaving the room. I've stopped the rain. I've silenced you. I think the story was that one woman had gotten the painting from the other when they were dating, but she never paid for it, and then she moved out. The painting sat in the second floor window, and the painter saw it and demanded it back. No. So the painter wrote, "Marie O'Shea, give me back my painting," and put it in the window opposite. She's a mess. We call her. When it blasted, I asked you to put your headphones on. The dog's wheezing. I think smack in the middle of that time was a virus, and it gave itself to everyone freely. We learned that everything was related to everything else. Just as everything was getting more separate and no longer a simple bowl of fruit, everyone was dying of the same thing. Not everyone. Later, when they hit the buildings, it was just like everyone in the city felt it. Not the same. We felt the shake. The request in the air was, how do we all feel it now? It wasn't the same. It was like you kept breaking off another square of the bar and tasting it. He came running back into the room. He was moaning, and now he just stares, and the rain starts up again. I've never been invited to one meeting. Did they have them? I remember the time I was invited, and we went around the room saying how we came to be there. I was invited, and everyone stared, and they never let me know when they were meeting again. She wore a yellow dress. Everyone's watching you. He stands in the doorway watching you eat. It stopped. I want the painting in the window. Yeah. And you can really ask her questions when you get her alone. And you were reading all the time. And you said it a lot, that you wanted one, which you don't remember. I guess I wanted one. Now some people in that mysterious time, there it goes again, decided to, in a very dedicated way, begin talking about it because there wasn't enough of that. That part had waned. Otherwise, you could just take it off the walls, you could go to funerals and get. You could recite it so that all they saw was you. Huge numbers of them banded together, marching slowly into the room. There's footage of us dancing. I wouldn't ask the stars to be quiet, but I'm closer to them now. She was so smart. I'm serious. I bet she'd make a good one. Since I didn't grow my own, I'd like to see what she'd make me. If he demands that no one tells, there's a story about a famous writer who said at breakfast to his family, and I think they were all female, that nobody was to tell their dreams at the breakfast table. I was like, that is so crazy, right? If he demands that no one tells theirs at the breakfast table, I think he probably pulls it out of his pajamas and slaps it on the table. Dreams to me are always receding. It's the only perfection. It's vanishing, stoking my appetite, so I'm drawing it for you as it becomes less the experience just that happens as I'm resurrecting it for you. I'm making it for you. I'm asking her, make it for me. I'd like that. I'm putting it in real deep, out there, where everyone is. Thank you. I feel like they're all different, but that was like a little amusement park, that one. I was like, so this is weird. Okay, I went to UMass Boston, which was kind of like it was like the state school. It wasn't, like in Boston with so many private colleges, there wasn't a public university for essentially the working class kids or like the wives of graduate students who were going to private colleges or Vietnam vets. And this is like, the late 60s, early 70s. So they started UMass Boston, where I went to school, and I commuted from the suburbs. I grew up in Arlington. And, but I'm Irish Catholic and Polish Catholic. And so to be Irish in Boston at that time, you were just overwhelmed by, Irish American, like Danny Boy and Leprechauns. We all hated it. We were in college. We were like smart. We're not like Irish like that, And so there was this astonishing class that I took that was like, gave everybody their pride, which was called Celtic literature. And so we read early Irish lyrics, we read Irish legends, we read Welsh poetry, and we were like, oh my God, there's this whole history that precedes, Irish Americanism and what we thought of as corny. So I took that class, and in the class there were these Welsh poems that were called gnomic stanzas. And what they were was just like, they were like nature poems. Like there would be one beautiful nature line, like there would be like, the branch fell, and then there'd be like a homily, like it would be like, the branch fell, the guilty flee, though no man pursueth. And it was like, ooh, so it was just like, and they were written by anonymous, they were very beautiful. So I read these poems in college, I love them, and then like 40 years later, I buy a house in Texas, in West Texas, where the mountains are. And I was like, oh my God. And I wrote one of those poems. It just took me like 40 years to let the idea move through me, which I think is one of the weirdest, like you read all, like as a writer, you read all this, like I read sci-fi my whole life, and everything I wrote was not sci-fi. And then finally, like I wrote, it's not here, but I wrote a dog book in which I claim that, like my father died when I was 11. He was an alcoholic, great guy. And I got my first dog when I was 40, and I looked in the dog's eyes, and I was like, oh my God, it's my father. And so, and then I wrote my first book of like total fantasy, but it took me like 50 years of reading fantasy and sci-fi for it to kind of come out in a book. So it all moves slow. You just have to wait for stuff, right? So this poem is called Western Poem. Purple clouds, my doubts. Iridescent cream, my loss. Purple mountains, my friends. Buzzards circling overhead, my hopes. Birds singing, jagged singing, my indecision. Wrecked skinny tree, my past. Photographs I send home, my indiscretion. Amber street light, my reading. My appetite. Red striped sky, my confusion. Bright yellow gray sky, my ardor. Car lights, my commotion. Telephone pole, my wishes. Stop sign, my fear. Family dollar. Courthouse, my opinion. Black cloud, white sky, hesitation. Black cloud, white sky, bliss. Blinking signals, my intentions. Black mountains, too many suggestions. Skipping white lines, my attention. A young cowboy first saw the lights. The horns on your van, my defensiveness. That old train, my dreams. That old train. Thank you. If you, there's a town, the town I have a house in, Marfa, Texas, has a train that just goes through about 16 times a day. So no matter what you're doing, especially if it's a movie, at some point it's great. Like if you show a movie that's a Western and you hear this train go through town, you're like, that's incredible. But no matter what you do, there's going to be a train running through it. I fell in love. I've fallen in love many times. But the thing about falling in love if you're a poet is that, all poems are is just lists of things, really, and they're like prayers are just lists, right? It's just da-da and da-da, 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 da-da. But if you're in love, you're like, oh my God, da-da, 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 So when I was in love in May of 2015, I was like, holy so these are some of them. This is called May 26th. I keep to tiny gestures, sweet William, dazzling orange sky, my, dying New York. You. I'm bravely eating my croissant at everyone. I'm living on my wetboard. I'm living on my money, limits set and lights lower. I worship the blue marks on the hydrant, how like the name of a flower. And this one, I'm actually just talking to a computer, and it's also called You. After all these years, you should know my font. You should know the numbers go in the middle, what I say. There's so many of you, why don't you talk? Each time I have to click and press. What's the use of being famous? You. And this one's called Circus, and it's a love poem, too. Jill tells me about the show she is making, and I thought, it's like flowers. What kind of flowers am I making? I think I met you at work. I'm home now, and think, what kind of flower am I making? How do we find the flower, use the flower, spread it around? I thought summer's a good growing season, or is it? Is summer just hot? I could bring my flowers to your flowers, always afraid when I show that maybe I'm making a funeral. Whatever I am when I show it around. I love your flowers. A fingertip has so many hands, and you love mine. How is it to love for once, and to see it all now, to be so afraid of loving and dying? Mounds of flowers go to my head. I love you inside there, also out to show. I want to bring you so many flowers. This one's my mom dying is totally shaped this book. And part of the process of dying in a family is that everybody's like, oh my God, it's happening. And everybody comes together and you're there and you're in the room. And then she doesn't die and you're like, oh, you all go back. So, and it's just like, I was sitting in the room. As a poet, all I ever do is write at or on what I'm looking at. And so this is kind of that too. It's called Failed Appointment. If I thought I couldn't write in you ever, throw her out, I did. Time for something new. Your short, broken self requires a brand new weapon. Skinny old lady ankles. Nobody sees them. You are my private furniture. We're shocked at her ass. And a bill is stuck to the wall with a knife. At least once we joked about piggies. We were her kids and pretended to care about other people's hearts. To put this book together, when I was putting this book together, so it's like, if you're a poet, it's like, if you're a visual artist, you get a retrospective in a museum. If you're a poet, you get a selected poems, So when I was putting that book together, I just was like, and then the book gets put together, and then you go around reading these poems, and you're reading from your 20s, and you're reading from your 30s, and you're just kind of like going through your past all the time. It's very weird. So at some point I thought, I'm just going to write one of those old poems. And I did, this is called, where is it? Notebook, 1981. But it's fake. I was so willing to pull a page out of my notebook a day, several bright days, and live them as if I was only alive, thirsty, timeless, young enough to do this one more time, to dare to have nothing so much to lose, and to feel that potential dying of the self in the light is the only thing I thought that was spiritual, possible. And because I had no other way to call that mind, I called it poetry, but it was flesh and time and bread and friends, frightened and free enough to want to have another day that way, tear another page. And then my mom died, and I'm going to tell a story that doesn't, well, I don't think it ruins the poem, but it maybe sometimes you tell the same stories twice and it helps. Because she died, and before, I was just like, I think I was doing a reading in Kentucky, and so I met a writer there, and he gave me his book, and then I got that phone call, and I was like, this is it. So I went bombing there to where my mother was, and then we spent time with her, and then she died, and then I was on a train from Boston to New York, and I was reading my friend's book, and there was a really weird story in the book about a about a person who got on a plane, and the plane took off, and then it just started to circle, and it just kept circling and circling, and then it turned out that the plane was running on eternal oil, and that it would never run out, and people died, and people were born, and people, just all of creation happened on the plane. But the thing that was so weird was I was sitting on the train, and my mother had just died, and I was reading this book, and so it was kind of like my head was on a plane, but my body was in a train, and then I had just lost my mom, and it was just like, it was so messed up and perfect at once, So this poem is called A Little Bit. It's a little bit true that the hole in my jacket pocket, the breast pocket, all relaxed as a whole, and pens keep slipping through. One's in the lining, but this one perched. Now it's a writing bird. Silly black out there wants to tell its song. Manuel's book was in the air, and I was on a train. My feet are cold, and you wouldn't be in the air so long. It doesn't happen like this. There's no climate in a plane, and I was in one, but not on Earth. My mother is gone. Each thing I do is a little bit wrong. I'm willing to apologize, but they never help. It's just pointing out the hole, and people forget, but I won't forget you. This one's called The West. This one is in the New Yorker. It's like weird. It's like, this one is in the New Yorker. It wasn't the New Yorker. It's just like, what do they like? It was like for years I would have, if I write a beautiful poem, by writing a beautiful poem, I was like, this one is for the New Yorker. And then I'd say, or I was like, this one is not for the New Yorker. This is not, I mean, this, the first poem they published of mine said, I think. I was like, what's happening to the New Yorker? Like, nobody's, this one doesn't say either, but I'm just bragging, I guess. It's called The West. There might be nothing. The section of the paper I saved for later about buildings, the home, inside, outside too, yard, the garden, things that do well, what I have in mind. My favorite radio show is Garden Compass. It's like gossip about someone else's life and how to save them and their plants and their flowers. It's like Eloise. The road is long. I mean it. All I need is to hear a certain designer plans to be alone for the rest of his life, and I think I'm like him. And I'm dying to see that movie, how he does every little thing. It's as simple as being a sculpture having a life. This is not the book of instruction I had intended, but this is when the emptiness noticed its own beginning, like that church I saw when I was young that was simply melting. This is for those who would not name that building, but simply step in, noticing when that has happened. An elaborate piece, like being a candelabra, and that is the road you are on. I thought, bring your camera. I thought, don't bring your camera. That's what I mean. There'll be plenty for everyone, and my style is adequate to that. Has been planning this moment for years, ushering it in. Tonight, I will do books. I am leaving my house. Which ones do I need? I think you can come on a long and horizontal road of reading. I'm very attuned to you. I was like, you turned, I was like, it's long enough for this guy. I was like, no. We're close to the end of the book, so guess what that means. Huh. Okay, this is just, okay, we're in this political moment, as we know, and so as a poet, you're always like, do you have a political poem? I was like, I don't have a political poem. And then I turn, and I have a political poem. So this is one of my political poems. It's called Creep. Ugly nightmare, eating too much, dunking your head in water over and over again. Feel bad for your kid, all of them, but most of all, us. Bad nights when I was young and drinking, predatory men with swollen heads would buy me drinks and want to fuck me again and again because I was nothing to them, and he is our president now. It's like, I'm reading two more poems. This one's called Transmission, and it has the word in it, which I was in South America recently, and somebody was translating the poem, and when they got to that word, they wrote on the translation, obscene word. I was like, really? Is obscene? I just thought it's like genital, right? But as somebody who is female, who's written about sex, not so much, but if you write about sex at all, you're kind of regarded as a female person who writes about sex all the time. And then when you get interviewed, or if you get asked to write things, they'll say, would you write something about sex? I was like, no, I'm sick of talking, you know. So that's what when I say in this poem, that's what I'm talking about. So it's called Transmission. I'm overcome by the cruelty of nature. No, I mean I'm with it. And each little capacity it has can't be transferred. I mean, a spruce can't give its oils to you, can it? But that's how it grows. In the absence of technology, my thoughts grow. My thoughts grow among trees, but I don't help them, though I'm for them. I'm for my dog, and incidentally, I feed her, but I don't see her much. Joe does. Joe is my friend and also a dog father. I don't help mountains. Mountains help me. I know the planet is old and splashy. Sleep helps me. Time helps me. My mother helped me, and now she is gone. She also hurt me, so it's good that she's gone. I can grow different in the day or 3 decades in which I've got left. I can grow towards the mountains, sit in solidarity with prisoners, or go to jail. I'm not joking. I can push different. I want to say something about my because that's what you ask. But I am alone. No mother, no phone, just a notebook and my thoughts. I don't even think my thoughts. You do. Come on, you like that poem. Huh? The gentlemen in the front are getting a hard time. I'm obsessed with you guys. And this is the last poem in the book, so I guess this is the final poem of the reading. But it's called Sweetheart. And I just want to say, the thing about being a poet is that no matter what happens, you're like, I'm going to write a poem, you know? So it was just like somebody, the person I was in love with for books, you know, if you're a poet, you like write for about 3 or 4 years, and then the book is that, you know? So you fall in love, then you fall out of love, and then you write love poems, and you write so the person I was in love with deeply disappointed me. And so I was like, you know, so I went home and I'm like, now what? And so I went in my yard and I wrote a poem called Sweetheart. I was like, dealt with that. This is so great. So I'm in South America. If you see the word fresca in South America, they're like, what? I think it means fresh, right? I'm like, no, fresca. I mean fresca. And they were like, yeah, fresh. I was like, no, fresca. Fresca's got a new look, but I'm not drinking that. My Coke struck the ice and the ice cube cracked. I'm sitting by the little Buddha who is sitting in my yard. I imagined you walking in, gasping at the same couch, the same bed. It's almost the same town, but this is what I meant. And there's so much pleasure, difference, and this, that. I meant to be here. One sleeps on what they mean and arises on the decided side, and that's the hope. An entire room is opened by particular feelings that say, you're on the edge of the space, and then you wait to watch it grow. Grow like a love or a feeling of distrust or a body grateful for sun and breeze and the rising and falling of my dog's chest. No, God. The little Buddha's smiling southeast, I figured that out. Their genitals are unknown. In fact, they're everything smiling, walked on by ants, planted in the dirt but not dead, activated by my gaze. Their smiling makes me glad. Dog turns Buddha's way. I go forward with confidence. I may turn up nothing with this gentle scratching in my yard before making a call, opening the self somehow so it's possible to have a friend to call, not only from need but interest in their life, the body I'm pouring into, joyous to be connected to someone, well covered by ants, surrounded by breeze, actually touched by birds, their sound, then landing. There is nothing romantic in their absence. The bird is all touch, no matter how distant their flight. The sky is open. My gaze is wide. It matters how they dive and hover. The silly cluck, the nini constant, the hoot makes the gray sky blue, trees, brown, green, slanting trees. The woman dying in her face thought, am I recording? But it was the young man counting everything. Cora Crete, whose art I like so much, performed Bird in the dying woman's sky, so his quote was reverential. That she could be copying anything by dying was more about him. A mustache on the sound that life's made of. I think you don't miss me enough. You regard me as seasons that simply come, and it's true. I'm everything. I used to love so much to show you my poems, but everything's not enough. You have to go out and shake everything's hand, and the tremendous feeling of everything is not shook enough. I'm sick of being God for you. I'm not the fresca or the Buddha or the bird. I'm the ice that cracks. I'm really feeling it now. The amazing difference of contact, everything's gasp. It begins so slow. Hours of freezing, waiting, a life, and the draining of it by waiting too long. Riding around in a car. I'm not any Coke, I'm every Coke. And a bird likes the sound of that, to be so close the earth parts for its own arrival. The time of day is enchanted by my jeans on the line. I'm enchanted by everything too. How could I be it and feel it? Drawing sunline, sticks. If I say two again and I'm creating a pattern, someone who doesn't love me will say, you say two too much. I suppose going blind is momentarily seeing colors in everything and remembering them for the rest of your life. I'm afraid to tell you I'm going blind. What I'm saying is I'm retiring from God. I will feel my genius quietly, the furrows of a dead tree accepting my love. You start like a car and pepper in a number of growls. That's dog. You roll in your bird, and Buddha's difficult now, more of an aside. That something so different as the sun could turn, I think, and we're turning on our dirty little urn. There's a movie about everything, my getting this part of that, endlessly obliged to be wise. Upstairs, 16 little eggs turn in another galaxy, someone else's sandwich. Today, I was so busy I didn't even see lunch. I had it, but I didn't see it at all. The distant eggs are turning for someone else. I poured Fresca into my glass, and then I poured my vodka, and then I got drunk. Darker day now, when my throat fills and Buddha's awake. A bee wants to sting me, and in that moment, I would notice everything. Why do you think I'm sweet? Why must I die? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Boy, doesn't the sound of poetry do you good? Oh. Well, thank you again, Eileen, for coming to funny little Mystic and gracing us with your poems. Yeah, we too, I think. Thank you also to Melanie Greenhouse and the cast of Bald Eagle. To Fred and friends, to John, Rufus, and Jim. Let me encourage you to take a book of Eileen's home with you tonight, which I'm sure she'd be glad to sign for you. We have, among others, the magnum opus, I Must Be Living Twice, an extraordinary greatest hits, if you will, and the new book from which she read tonight, Evolution. These books will do you good too. Our final thanks, as always, is to you, our audience. This is community, my friends, and don't it feel good? Thank you. Good night.